giving birth, Orm had taken the initiative to pump breast milk as a backup, just in case he was too tired or couldn't wake up. The small fridge was intentionally provided by Ling, so that breast milk could be stored easily without having to go back and forth to the kitchen, which was quite far from the room. Ling opened the fridge and took out 2 bottles of breast milk that had already been prepared. Deftly, she warmed up the bottles, then returned to the side of Rachaya and Nachaya, who were still crying. "Okay, it's ready. Let's have some milk, kids." Ling sat on a small chair beside the baby box, preparing bottles of asa for her 2 crying children. She offered the bottles carefully, first to Rachaya, then to Nachaya. After a few seconds, Rachaya began to suckle quietly and stopped crying, her little face looking peaceful. Nachaya, however, looked different. She continued to cry, moving her small body as if rejecting the bottle in front of her. Ling sighed as she gently rubbed Nachaya's head, trying to calm the little one down. However, her cries only intensified, making Ling a little worried. In the confusion, Orm opened his eyes quickly and saw Ling sitting next to the baby box. "I'm sorry, Fi. I overslept," Orm said regretfully while rubbing his tired face. Quickly, he approached Ling and took the crying Nachaya from the baby box, carrying her gently. Ling looked at his wife with a gentle smile. "It's okay, dear. You've taken good care of the twins and you need some rest," Ling replied, rubbing Orm's arm lovingly. Orm nodded slowly, though he still felt a little guilty. "But Fi also just got home early this morning from filming. You must be very tired," he said, remembering how long Ling's day had been spent on set. He then sat down on the chair next to Ling and stripped off his shirt a little, preparing to nurse Nachaya, who seemed to only want to nurse directly from her mother. Nachaya slowly calmed down in Orm's arms. The sound of her crying gave way to soft sobbing, and her little face became serene, as if finding comfort that could only come from her mother. "I don't feel tired," Ling said, her voice sounding warm and sincere. Her eyes returned to Rachaya's face, who was fast asleep in the baby box, with calm breathing and a peaceful look on her face. "My tiredness disappears every time I see you and the twins' faces. Seeing you is a happiness that cannot be replaced with anything." "Peeling speaks the sweetest," Orm said with a small smile. He gently tucked Nachaya back into the baby box, making sure his little daughter was comfortable and fast asleep. After making sure his son was asleep, Orm looked lovingly at Ling again. "Go back to sleep, Fi. It's still 7 in the morning," he pleaded gently. Ling smiled slightly, his eyes flashing mischievously. "I'm not sleepy," she replied, giving Orm a teasing look. He brought his face a little closer. "Now it's time for me to drink the milk." Orm frowned, slightly confused by Ling's words. "Drink milk? I'll make some milk and breakfast for Peeling first," he said as he prepared to stand up from his chair. However, before Orm could go any further, Ling quickly grasped his hand, pulling him gently until Orm fell onto his lap. "That's not the milk I want," Ling whispered playfully, pointing at Orm's chest with her forefinger. "I want this milk." Orm stifled a giggle and patted Ling's shoulder gently. "Peeling," he exclaimed softly, unable to contain the smile that now graced his face. "The stitches from my cesarean section haven't healed completely. We can't do it now." Ling let out a long sigh, looking disappointed, but soon smiled resignedly. "Huff, all right, I get it," she said in a resigned yet joking tone. Seeing Ling's hilarious expression, Orm chuckled and cupped both her cheeks. Once my stitches get better, we can play as much as we want, he said sweetly before giving Ling a quick peck on the lips. After a while, Orm slowly broke the kiss and looked at Ling lovingly. Get some rest, Fi, he said as he patted Ling's cheek gently. I'll prepare some food for you when you wake up. Ling nodded in understanding, looking at Orm, who was starting to move from his lap. But don't get too tired and move around too much. I'm worried that it might affect your stitches. Orm smiled and shook his head lightly. If I just cook and take care of the twins, it won't hurt my stitches, Fi. All the household chores have been handed over to the arts since I gave birth, except for cooking and taking care of the twins. After giving Ling one last smile, Orm walked out of the room with cautious steps. While Ling walked back towards the bed, he flung his tired body onto the mattress, then slowly closed his eyes, letting sleepiness take over again. Orm's days at home had become increasingly hectic. Since the birth of Rachaya and Nachaya, his twin daughters were now 3 years old, entering an active period that often overwhelmed Orm. Moreover, when Ling is at work, the responsibility of taking care of them falls entirely on Orm. Ling had offered to hire a nanny, but Orm refused. He wanted to raise his children on his own, without the help of others. Like this afternoon, Orm was busy persuading his 2 children to take a bath and stop playing. Rachaya, Nachaya, it's late afternoon. Let's take a bath, Orm said, repeating the same phrase over and over again. However, her 2 children were still playing, seemingly ignoring their mother's call. Come on, let's take a shower first. Don't keep playing, Orm urged patiently, while trying to catch her 2 children who were running around in the garden behind the house. Suddenly, a shrill cry was heard, prompting Orm to immediately run towards the fallen Rachaya. See what Mama said. Don't run around, Orm said gently as he cleaned Rachaya's muddy feet and hands. Come on, let's end the game, he added as he led Rachaya and Nachaya into the house. Orm took his 2 daughters to their rooms. One by one, he took off Rachaya and Nachaya's clothes before inviting them into the bathroom. Orm began bathing his 2 little daughters in the bathtub, gently scrubbing their bodies one by one. While he was busy washing and scrubbing, he told them colorful stories, answering Rachaya and Nachaya's innocent questions. Sometimes, Orm would smile with amusement at his children's funny thoughts that tickled his heart. In between baths, Orm would often sing cheerfully. He composed simple songs himself, or sometimes just took melodies they were familiar with and added funny lyrics. In this way, he tries to work on the twins' speech while introducing them to new words. He knows that the age of 3 is an important period for a child's language development, and he wants to play a full part in that process. There's a little duck swimming in the water. Quack, 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 Orm sang, gesticulating like a swimming duck, making Rachaya and Nachaya laugh happily. Orm smiled at their clear, cheerful laughter. Every time they followed his singing with their little voices, Orm felt very happy. In the middle of the story and singing, Rachaya suddenly asked, Mama, why can ducks swim but we can't? We'll also learn to swim, really. I promise. Orm laughed at the question, then answered patiently. Because ducks have webbed feet, like little paddles. But later on, you, Nachaya, who heard this explanation, immediately patted the water with her little hands, as if trying to imitate how a duck swims. Little moments like this were precious to Orm, who felt that every moment he spent with the twins was meaningful. After rinsing and drying Rachaya and Nachaya, Orm wrapped warm towels around their tiny bodies. Orm took the twins back to the room, leading them to sit on the edge of the bed, while he picked out Rachaya and Nachaya's clothes. "Dada's home," came Ling's voice from outside the room, sending Rachaya and Nachaya running towards the door. As soon as Ling entered the room, his two daughters jumped up and hugged him tightly. "Oh, you must miss Dada, huh?" Ling said softly as he crouched down, returning the warm embrace from his two daughters, whom he had not seen for 3 days. Due to a business trip to Taiwan, the accumulated longing was now rewarded by their cheerful presence in front of him. After a while, Rachaya and Nachaya let go of the hug. They gave small nods in response to Ling's question. Their smiling faces made Ling couldn't help stroking their hair while smiling happily. Orm, who saw their closeness, suddenly spoke in an astonished tone, peeling. "Why didn't you tell me that you're going home now? I haven't prepared any dinner yet. Is it okay if we eat late?" Ling looked at Orm with a meaningful smile. "I wanted to surprise you," she said with a small grin. "As for dinner, we can just order out, so you don't have to bother with cooking, dear." Orm smiled in response, but he shook his head lightly. "There's no way I'm not cooking for Peeling as homecoming," he replied with a gentle but determined smile. Ling chuckled thoughtfully for a moment, then stood up and approached Orm. "Then let me take care of the twins so you can start cooking now." Orm smiled, then kissed Ling's cheek lovingly. "Thank you. Fine, I'll cook for a while," he said. Then he hurried out of the room to prepare the special meal. After Orm left, Ling turned her attention back to Rachaya and Nachaya, who stood looking at her with enthusiastic smiles. "Now, let's pick out some clothes for you to wear," Ling invited, leading them to the wardrobe. Unlike Orm, who usually decides everything for the twins, Ling lets them choose for themselves. For her, this was a way to train the twins' independence, even for small things like choosing clothes. Ling smiled proudly at Rachaya and Nachaya's rapid development. After a hearty dinner together, it was time for Rachaya and Nachaya to go to bed. Ling took over the task of escorting the twins to bed tonight, while Orm cleared the table in the kitchen. Gently, Ling led her daughters by the hand to their room. Upon arrival, Ling guided the twins to the bed and fixed their pillows and blankets. After making sure they were comfortable, she lovingly wrapped her arms around their tiny bodies, patting them gently to calm them down. Suddenly, Nachaya pointed to the bookshelf in the corner of the room, saying in a low voice, "Dada, read a storybook." Ling smiled at the request. "All right, what story do we want to read tonight?" he murmured as he stepped over to the bookshelf. Looking at the selection of stories neatly arranged there, Ling's hand finally reached for a book with a brightly colored cover and a picture of a little fox. "How about a story about the adventures of the fox and his friends? Do you like it?" she asked, showing the book to her two children. Rachaya and Nachaya nodded with sparkling eyes, a sign of their unstoppable enthusiasm. Ling walked back to the side of the bed, sat on the small chair that had been set up nearby, and opened the first page. In a soft and expressive voice, Ling began to read the story. In a quiet green forest, there lived a little fox named Raffi. Raffi had many friends, such as the agile rabbit, the wise owl, and the jumping squirrel. As sentence after sentence was read, Rachaya and Nachaya seemed to become more and more immersed in the story. Their eyes sparkled with curiosity, and they occasionally smiled at the little fox's adventures. Ling not only read the story, she also used different voices for each character, making her two daughters even more enthusiastic and immersed in the story. When Ling got to the funny part of the story, the twins chuckled, covering their mouths while holding back their laughter. Ling smiled at their reaction, feeling proud and happy to be able to provide such precious moments. Finally, after a few pages, Ling saw her daughter start to yawn, a sign of sleepiness she couldn't resist. Gently, she closed the book and placed it on the small table beside the bed. All right, today's story ends here. The little fox and his friends will continue their adventure another night. Ling said with a smile and stroked the twins' heads gently. Dada, the fox is sleeping too, isn't it? Whispered Rachaya with her eyes almost closed. Ling nodded. Yes, the little fox and all his friends are asleep too. Now it's Rachaya and Nachaya's turn to sleep, so that tomorrow morning we can go on another adventure with them. After that, Ling turned off the room lights, leaving only the soft nightlight burning in the corner of the room. She gave each of them a peck on the forehead, then whispered softly, "Good night, sweetheart. Sweet dreams, yes?" Ling exited the room with a peaceful heart, closing the door slowly, making sure the twins could sleep peacefully. Ling finally entered her room, where she saw Orm waiting for her on the bed, leaning comfortably against the headboard while reading a small book. When he heard Ling's footsteps, Orm turned his head and smiled warmly. "Are the twins asleep?" he asked softly, looking at Ling standing in the doorway. Ling nodded slowly with a smile. "They're fast asleep," Ling replied, walking over and climbing into bed, relieved to finally be able to rest after a long day with the children.